The lawyers group said in a statement Thursday signed by President Salou Tal that it is their view that the declaration of a state of public emergency consecutively by the President on the 19th May 2020, 10th June 2020, 1st July 2020 and 7th July 2020 is in effect a usurpation of powers granted to the National Assembly, and it is a dangerous precedent for our democracy. President Adama Barrow on July 7 declared a fresh state of public emergency throughout the country in a bid to stop the spread of the coronavirus. State House in a statement said the declaration shall last for a period of 7 days with effect from 8 July 2020. But according to the Bar Association, Section 34(6) does not give the President the unfettered power or a carte blanche to declare a state of public emergency consecutively based on the same emergency, thereby circumventing parliamentary scrutiny and oversight, which is an essential check on the exercise of such emergency powers. The right and proper course of action was for the executive to table a motion to extend the state of emergency before the National Assembly. This in line with the spirit and substance of the Constitution, which is the supreme law of this country, the group added. It comes as National Assembly member for Serekunda, Halifa Sallah, made a proposal on Tuesday to follow lawmakers for the Vice President to be summoned over the state of emergency declarations.
Honorable Speaker, my statement, whereas any proclamation published in the Gazette on 18th March 20, whereas by proclamation published in the Gazette on 18 March 2020, the President of the Republic did declare that a situation did exist which, if it is allowed to continue, may lead to a state of public emergency, whereas this declaration was made while the National Assembly was still in session, but lapsed in 7 days because of the absence of a motion for extension by the National Assembly, whereas by proclamation published in the Gazette on the 26th of March 2020, the President of the Republic did declare that a state of public emergency exists in the whole of the Gambia, which was followed by moving a motion for a resolution by the National Assembly to extend the declaration for a period of 90 days, whereby a resolution adopted on the 3rd of April 2020, supported by the votes of not less than 2/3 of all the members of the National Assembly, extension of the state of public emergency was made for a period of 45 days, whereas a motion was moved in the National Assembly before the expiration date for a resolution by the National Assembly to extend the declaration for a period of 90 days, which failed to get the support of the quarters of all the members of the National Assembly, whereas by proclamation published in the Gazette on the 19th of May 2020, the President of the Republic did declare that a state of public emergency exists in the whole of the Gambia, whereas the declaration made on 19th May 2020 was for a period of 21 days since the National Assembly was not in session, whereas by proclamation published in the Gazette on the 9th June 2020, the President of the Republic did declare that a state of public emergency exists in the whole of the Gambia with effect from 10th June 2020, while the National Assembly was not in session, whereas the proclamation was said to be done by relying on Section 34, subsection 6 of the Constitution, whereas the 5th National Assembly commences its second ordinary session in 2020 legislative year on 15th May 2020, whereas the order paper of 30th June 2020 contained a motion for the extension of a state of public emergency for another 45 days and for the further affirmation of the emergency regulation by the National Assembly under Section 5, subsection 2 of the emergency powers effective 1st July 2020, whereas the said motion was later withdrawn without any explanation, whereas the National Assembly is still in session without any motion coming from the Office of the President for an extension of a state of emergency or affirmation of the emergency powers regulation, being convinced that it would amount to a dereliction of duty if the National Assembly failed to summon the Office of the President to explain why the motion for an extension of the state of emergency was withdrawn and a press release issued on the declaration of a state of emergency while the National Assembly is still in session. I humbly move that this august body summons the Vice President to come and answer 3 fundamental questions. Why the motion for an extension of the state of public emergency for a period of 45 days did with effect from Wednesday, 1st July 2020, as per the order paper of 30th June 2020 was withdrawn? Has the state of emergency been declared since the National Assembly commenced session? If so, when was it declared and under what authority, what emergency power regulations are currently in force and under what authority. How the executive computes time to determine the expiry date of each of the declaration of a state of public emergency since 18 March 2020. Answers to this question will provide sufficient evidence for the National Assembly to determine whether the executive is acting in line with the letter and spirit of the Constitution it has taken oath to respect, uphold, and enforce or not.